So if we think the women of, let's say, your family system for 7 generations, what were their habits and what were their patterns? And if they were, let's say, givers, helpers, carers, healers, we're very loyal to that systemic pattern that we don't know. I think there's the 21st century of like blaming ourselves for so much, where the systemic work is this idea of leaning back and actually seeing all of, let's say, all the women or all the men in our family, what was their pattern. I've even recently heard, and again, speaking of men and not just women, because this impacts everyone, some Black African heritage men living in America who they never knew what it'd be like to live over 40 because none of the men in their family and their line had ever reached 40. So they never planned for future, they never planned for pensions.
Just a little taster of what is coming up on the show. But first, please do like this video and subscribe to the channel. And also tell your friends and family about this podcast. Please let us know in the comments if you would like to hear any particular topic in relation to sleep or health. And I will create a show especially for you, just for asking the questions. So let's get on with the show. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Empowering Family Health podcast. I'm your host, Joanne Callahan. I am the sleep success coach. And again, we're going to have another incredible conversation with the wonderful Norma O'Kelly. She's on with us today. We're going to be talking all about systemic coaching. What is that, I hear you say, and how you can apply that to your life. And Norma has an incredible, really empowering story that I can't wait for her to share and help to empower you on your journey through entrepreneurship and whatever it is that you're doing in life and business. So, Norma, you are very welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thanks, Joanne, and thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Norma, I'm always intrigued, with the people that I bring onto the podcast. And, it's all about empowering people. And I believe everybody has come from a family, right? And who we become in our life is as a result of our upbringing and our surroundings, our events, the people we hang around, all that great stuff, right? And you have your own story of why you became an entrepreneur and how you came to be the work that you're doing today in the world. Can you share with us a little bit, Norma? Because I'm always intrigued about people's why it is that you're doing the work that you're doing today.
Yeah, thank you. And you gave a little hint there as part of it. Who we are in our families is who we are often, sometimes in the world, both the good, bad, and all the entanglements in between. So that's definitely part of my story as well. So yeah, I'm a transition coach who specializes in systemic coaching. So which is different to, I suppose, your standard life coaching or executive coaching, where it is a very specific style. And we use constellations, which is this living map to see where we are in relation to others. And it comes from the background to systemic coaching is family constellations is kind of the origin of some of the work, along with NLP. And it has branched into, in the style that I am, is organizational constellations. And constellations, again, it's just a living map. It's just a framework. But it really is honoring who we are in our families, who we are in all the systems we have been in, not just our families. So our schooling, our faith, our local communities, our sporting organizations. The role that we play often in our family is the role that we often take on in different parts of, let's say, even in our working lives. So I am the second child. And on the surface, on paper, I might have said I was the youngest, but actually my mother had 3 babies that died after me. So I'm actually one of 5. So when we acknowledge all of the family, even the babies that didn't make it, we see ourselves in a greater context. And so I'm the only girl and eldest daughter. And again, we had again, to the outside world, we were the gentleman's family, 2 kids. But there was a lot of grief behind that as well, for my mom, who had lost 3 babies after me.
Yeah.
So I took on the role of carer as a very, very young girl, because my mum obviously was, quite grief stricken after losing not only three children, but before I was born, my grandmother died as well. And she was living away from near her family. So from a very young age, I would have played the role of, and I suppose the person who I saw was the helper, the good girl, mommy's girl, and how further on in my life I became that person. I was like the captain of the hockey team. I was like deputy head girl. I was always wanting to lead and be there for others and help others and be, that was kind of my part of my purpose. And although that is all very honorable and a lovely thing, where it became a problem later in life was I overgave, and some of
Mm.
my balance of exchange was off. And in the work that I do, we talk about this idea of balance. So where we overgive all the time, we have real trouble receiving.
Oh, yeah.
So even on LinkedIn, I had an article this week around martyrdom. That's something that we would have seen. So I definitely had a bit of unhealthy martyrdom traits in me. And I can't say I'm fully eradicated of those either. It's just honoring that is something within me where I like to help the other. And where it becomes a problem is that we make the other more important than us. Because it's not that they're more important or less important. We're all equal, but we have to care for ourselves in that. And I suppose that is acknowledging your beautiful work as well, Joanne, the need to rest and the need to take time out and the importance of sleep. And this is all part of that balance of exchange. Where it became complicated for me was I got quite very unwell at the age of 28. And I was diagnosed with very aggressive endometriosis, and I lost my right ovary in an emergency surgery, and was told at 28 that I probably wouldn't have children. So that was, I suppose, the start
Yeah.
of everything, really.
Another start. Another start.
Exactly. So I think it's in hindsight, it was a very, very painful time. But
Mm.
from then on, really, I could safely say my life really began and like working towards who I am now and today. So there was that pain into purpose. And over those next, I would say 13, 14 years, I went on to have 5 other surgeries, ending with a hysterectomy,
Mm.
while
Wow.
also navigating quite a senior marketing career. So I was in marketing side by side with that. Worked for like amazing brands like Nokia, EA Sports, Oracle, and finished up with and worked for drinks companies even before that. Jameson, name the brands. I've probably worked on them, both consumer and business. And then my last role was as a director of marketing for Salesforce. So I was in tech for probably the last 10 years. And it was, I suppose, in the latter part of my tech career that this whole purpose thing became really, really important. And where I stumbled upon after becoming, I suppose, the basic life coach, I then went on to specialize. And at the same time, I lost my mom. And again, I'm cutting long stories short because
Yeah.
they're being recorded on many other podcasts, that my whole story. But my mother sadly got sick while I was training to be a coach, which again ended up actually in my favor because I learned what was important really was to be there for her. And I kind of put work on the boil and to the side, and really
Yeah.
time with her, and really made a bit of a promise to her on her dying bed, that I would look to really follow my heart and not just, remain in corporate life where I was very unhappy. Even though it took me another few years to eventually get out, her dying was a big part of my story about truly finding systemic coaching and rewriting all the balances of exchange that were off, and probably places where I might have overly sized myself. So I made myself quite big in spaces and small
Uh-huh.
places. And that's all linked to that balance piece as well. So yeah, so now I find myself 2 years in as a systemic coach with a combination of executive clients.
The ability to rest is the body's key to healing. Do you struggle with getting asleep at night time or staying asleep during the night and waking up the next morning feeling absolutely exhausted? My book, How to Get a Good Night's Sleep, is easy to understand. It's solution-based and it's packed with research to help you take back control of your night's sleep. My book is available on Amazon and it's also available on howtogetagoodnightsleep.com. This book is also available in audio and ebook. So get your copy today and start having the best night's sleep that you've only ever dreamed of.
and still on the corporate side, and a lot of people that are looking to start their own business outside of corporate life as either a side hustle or something full time. And combining my marketing and my systemic coaching, that's my kind of sweet spot now.
Well, do you know what, Norma? Yeah, you're some woman. I mean, I can really hear so many losses and
Mhm.
tragedies and grief. And we know grief is probably the lowest form of suffering. We are vibrational beings, as they say, and we're all energy. And I can hear an awful lot of loss through your whole life journey, various different things. And I'm sorry that you went through that. But as we say, it's not like it happened just for the sake of it. There's a strong underlying reason, and not that that makes it okay, but you are who you are today as a result of that. And I can really hear that you're so curious about, who you were, where you came from, and the work that you're doing. And I can really hear that the work that you're doing now is to help other people to prevent them from having to go through what you went through in some shape or form, to really help them to step into their empowerment
Yeah.
and utilize what where they came from to their strengths in the world today. You talked a lot about the constellation, and you talked about that in relation to a map,
Mhm.
so all the different various points through our life and what have you, and really having a look at that and reflecting. And you also talked a lot about roles. And I want to, talk a little bit more about roles, how we play different roles in our lives, because I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, I'm a daughter, a friend, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm all these things, and I wear various different hats. And we show up differently in these different roles, and it can be exhausting. Can you talk a little bit about how roles play out in our lives, Norma?
Yeah. So again, the first roles we see from a very young age are our family's roles, and whether you were the eldest or the youngest or in the middle, um, already we're placed in that place. So it's all about place is really important in systemic coaching. So what comes first takes precedence. So the elder, and this work is a nod to family constellations. As I said, it's not family constellations, but we take that as the where we learn those roles.
Yeah.
And when we're in a nuclear family, we're not just part of that family, we're part of a wider system of 7 generations. So if we think the women of, let's say, your family system for 7 generations, what were their habits and what were their patterns? And if they were, let's say, givers, helpers, carers, healers, we're very loyal to that systemic pattern that we don't know. So I think there's the 21st century of like blaming ourselves for so much,
Yeah.
where
Mhm.
systemic is this idea of leaning back and actually seeing all of, let's say, all the women or all the men in our family, what was their pattern. I've even recently heard, and again, speaking of men and not just women, because this impacts everyone, um, some Black African Black African heritage men living in America who they never knew what it'd be like to live over 40 because none of the men in their family and their line had ever reached 40. So they
Mm.
never planned for future. They never planned for pensions. So this is where we see the systemic kind of roles we play in our family become important, along with our worldview is if you're the youngest of a big family, the perception might be that you're spoiled, but in fact, you were the person who saw everything because you're leaning back and seeing the eldest and the dynamics, and also you're seeing parents that are tireder because they've gone through so much by the time you arrive. But the perception to the world is you're the spoiled one.
Yeah.
So this whole idea of like what names and roles that were put on us versus what is our experience. So it's a very, very, very different thing. So there's kind of twofold things playing on. Again, that the eldest is the responsible one, is the one that carries the load. But equally, there's eldest ones that don't take that position, that maybe a middle child might feel they play to the elder and not the elder. So this is what we call about entanglements. So it's not always because the eldest is the eldest.
That they
Can be
take on.
we could take on a role that wasn't ours because the elder, we don't know, wasn't able to, or
So there's always somebody who takes on that elder role, but you might not necessarily be the eldest in the family.
exactly, exactly, exactly.
Right.
And that's where the entanglements come in. And that's where what we see then, how that plays out in our workplace is if we've found it hard to find place in our family. So where we belong, let's say you might have a black sheep energy, and because maybe an uncle from 3 generations before was a black sheep, and you're taking on his or her representative energy, where it plays out in our workplaces, we might struggle to find belonging in our workplaces. And
Wow.
we might see ourselves moving around in different jobs and never really settling, or never settling in a place in a community, or finding home in oneself and finding a home. So place is really, really key in relation to the roles that we play. So it isn't always prescriptive or prescribed, but we could make some assumptions around the eldest and some assumptions around the youngest, but not in the way that the world puts on you, but in a really systemic lens on these 7 generations and the wider patterns.
That is so interesting. That makes so much sense about the black sheep, and for people who are wandering around from job to job aimlessly and not even knowing what it is that they're after necessarily, and feeling not satisfied or not aligned with the work and not knowing why. And that feeling of not being rooted. And we have to feel grounded and rooted in everything that we're doing, for us to really show up at our best. So that really makes so much sense. I'm the eldest in my family. I can totally relate to the overgiving, the hyperachiever, and it's interesting. I was doing some research and just looking up stuff about my constellations and my organizational patterns and what have you. And I often wonder why I'm doing the work that I'm doing, because I'm a sleep coach, right? So what is it that came before me that wanted me to be a sleep coach? And what I discovered was, obviously I've had my stories about being exhausted, not being able to sleep. My father drank an awful lot. He was an alcoholic with many late nights, all that kind of stuff, right? But my passion is about hyper achieving women. And I have to wonder, why is it specifically that? Because I'm really passionate about that area. And I'm a hyperachiever, right? Now, I'm like, but I'm not making millions, though. Are hyperachievers making loads of money, like, and all of this. I can see where I was a hyperachiever. Like, I had my first car when I was 17 or 18. I bought my first house when I was 21. All these like massive achievements as I grew up. So I can totally relate to that now. And even we had a conversation on a few weeks ago, and I got a lot of insights from our conversation. And that's why I had to have you onto this podcast, because it's very eye-opening when we have a look back, and in terms of the mapping and where we belong, and what society and the world at large expects from us as an individual, and the assumptions and opinions that we live by, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot. You have to have the detective hat on almost, don't you, to discover these things.
But also and that's the beauty of working with a coach. You can see the patterns, and it's to honor them, right? So in other work,
Yeah,
we would want to disconnect them, but actually in systemic work is this acknowledging what is, feeling through it. And that's why often my work works in tandem with psychotherapy. So I work with psychotherapists and people who are going through their own reflections and meaning making and feeling
yeah,
through. This gives that acknowledgement, but also what's lovely about it is this step to better. What would be a step to better? So it's not a cure all, it's not a fix all, but people, because it feels so different, they're being seen as they are. They're not discrediting it and
yeah,
not blaming anyone. It's not a blame. Yeah, and yet there's also room for anger and disappointment and hurt. So this overgiving piece, I think you really hit on. I'm an overachiever, but I'm not necessarily receiving my millions. And that idea is the balance of overgiving hasn't made room, and we see money as energy and receiving,
yeah,
right? We're rebalancing our exchange to receive and being seen in our work. So that's where I get the joy of working with entrepreneurs, in particular women who have always given in their life. When we're working in a service-based industry as coaches,
yeah.
you have to rewrite your balance of exchange in your fundamental life for you to be seen and receive in your work. And that's really key.
Yeah, and God, there's a couple of things I want to say there. So with the overachieving and with the, doing, and with the women in particular, because women there's a certain script for women, like, society over the generations expects us to be a certain way in the family home. And now we're actually leaders. Women, I see women as leaders, natural born leaders. We're already doing it in the family home, right? And now we're stepping into, the leadership role in corporates and business entrepreneurs, all that kind of stuff. But for many women, they don't see themselves as a leader and they don't want to be leaders, some of them. And that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But we do have the abilities for many of us to step into that role. But an awful lot that's stopping us, I think, Norma, is our belief in ourselves and the programming from before and what society's told us, what our parents have told us, all our teachers, social media, all this stuff.
And religiously, Joanne, is probably the biggest. So the Irish women, when we think of Queen Maeve, we were the leaders of the country until Catholicism really, where the role of women became lesser and lesser. So
Mhm.
Catholic women or the descendants of Catholic religion, there's guilt in growth, right? So where women
Oh,
had their place. So we talk about although we could step into the place of leadership that would go against the grain of the women, let's say, of the last 7 generations. But if we went back, whatever, 20, 30 generations, Irish women were already, there's the historic, you know, um, obviously Goddess Bridget, not just Saint Bridget, they're two different people, but Queen Maeve, we had all the leaders as women, but we were the system that came and changed those rules of belonging were faith based. And then because of faith and our country were co-created at the time. And Ireland is still a very young country when it comes to, democracy and all of that, but our rooted heritage is much longer. So if we were to deep into, and this is where the mapping comes in. If Queen Maeve, let's say, became a resource for us nowadays, and the strength of Maeve or the strength of any of the Bonreen of Ireland, we have access to their energy to
yes.
allow us to step into these roles. So we talk about stepping in, and resourcing is a huge thing that comes into systemic coaching. And your resourcing, let's say, a part of what you're offering, and I know it's only a fragment of what you offer is around sleep, whereas resourcing is also archetypes. So like the archetype of Bridget, the archetype of any of the Bonreens of Ireland, are there for us prior to any of the state and church being a huge system that had so much control over the women.
Yeah, it's interesting because, when we talk in terms of evolution, I mean, we're on this planet how many years, right? And in the last 100 years is only a blink in the eye in terms of evolution. So when we look back, like it's a really strong point that you made, Norma, that we were leaders before, like thousands of years ago. Society has kind of changed that narrative. And you mentioned, I just want to go back. I think it's a very important point that you said, like we came through the life that we lived the lives that we lived, and it's important for us to accept that because that is part of us. And the minute we reject it, we're rejecting part of us. And I know you talk a lot about being whole and complete. And that's where our power lies. That's where we take all our power back. And it's to acknowledge and honor. Because you talk a lot about acknowledging and honoring. And I really feel that's a very important part of growing and becoming the better person. And I think it's through all this learning of our experiences. And I see your face lighting up there, Norma. Can you talk a little bit more? I think there's room for a little bit more that you can say in
Yeah.
in, the, in terms of that.
And I think I'll give an example. I've worked with the client, and again, keeping all her details anonymous, where she left an organization where she left her, what might have been on paper confidence, but it was actually power. So in the work that I do, we go back and in the map and we acknowledge that time and that ending where she felt she left her power. And in a deep meditation, she goes back and she takes her power back.
Wow.
So because she's left it in that system, in the leaving and the ending. I work with a lot of people on endings. And once she has taken that power back and she sees the power as a symbol of a color, or she chooses something to represent that power and she reintegrates it in herself already, even in the meditation, she's sitting taller, she's feeling stronger, she's reclaimed something that she's left behind. So she's acknowledged it. We've honored that version of her in the past,
Yeah.
reclaimed it into her own way of being. So in her step to better, she's now ready to move forward and honor what happened to her. It was part of her story. You said the word earlier, to prevent people. I can't prevent anyone from doing anything, but we can look and honor that and just see how we take back those parts of ourselves and bring it forward in our steps to better.
Yeah. Mm.
There's something in that story about reclaiming the parts of us that are left in bad breakups, poor endings, not just in our workplaces, but maybe even school. It's never too late to look at an ending, even if the ending was when you were a child. Even if your parent died quite young. I would work with a lot of people whose parents have passed because it's my story. And they forget that they can access the energy of their parents, regardless of their faith. That their parents
Yeah.
were what an energetic vibration, and they can access that wisdom to resource them. And when we resource even parents where we have struggled with on their highest self, we feel more restored, we feel more whole. When we're fully feeling in our wholeness and our restoration, then we can achieve anything we want. So it's not only, as you say, it's that acknowledgement, it's the honoring, and then it's the restoration and bringing it back into us. Because once we have that as part of us, because our parents or ancestors are part of us, I see everyone as a triangle, or as a pyramid rather, and everyone is at the top of that pyramid. As all our ancestors are standing, we're standing on them, and they're propelling us forward. And in prior times, the top of the pyramid was coated with gold, so we're close to the sun. And
It
so
is.
we are there, but often people come to me as the inverted triangle, and we're holding the weight of the
Yeah.
ancestors, their pain, their purposes, their weight are on our shoulders. And a lot of this work is rebalancing that they're actually there to propel us forward. And they really, really want us to move into these purposeful work, whether it's entrepreneurship or remaining in corporate as a beacon of hope and a light.
So there was a purpose to it all, Norma.
Their pain and suffering, we get to honor it. We don't have to carry it. The Catholicism view might be to carry their crosses, but that's not serving us, because if you were walking around with the cross of all your ancestors and the pain and suffering of it,
God, keep loading up and loading up and loading up.
how could you get any great work, light work done? So, and we see this now with where we can honor, let's say, the suffering of Palestine because we've been through it, in our stories, but where you see people who are laying the weight of it, that, it's like you can still really acknowledge the pain and suffering, but you don't necessarily have to carry it heavy every day. You can allow yourself to step forward and still do purposeful work that will do good for the greater good of all. And it's this that reframing is deeper than a reframing. It's a move within the body that allows people to really not keep getting burnt out, not getting sick in the work. Because I think you and I believe, when you leave corporate life, it's all going to be wonderful. But if we're still carrying everybody's cross, we can still get sick in this work as well. So we have
Absolutely.
to.
I can really hear the burden and all that. And you know what was coming up for me as well when you were speaking is all the blame and the shame that we carry. Many people, that contributes to this exhaustion and overburdening the nervous system. And then we can't sleep at night, obviously, then. And sure, we know what happens after that when we can't sleep, especially on ongoing. All this blame. And I guess a lot of your work as well would involve forgiveness and taking back and being responsible for moving forward. Would that be fair to say?
Mm, So, yes, in some ways, but it's more forgiving yourself,
Well, that's
actually.
what I mean. Yeah, yeah, forgiving
Yeah,
ourselves.
yeah. Because, as I said, there's still room for anger and disappointment and hurt, because it would be sugarcoating
And
otherwise.
that's allowed. That would be allowed to because shit
100%.
happens. Like,
But
yeah, yeah,
also,
yeah.
what is in this work is you did what you did, and that's yours, that's on you. So I'm handing back the shame that is yours and it's not mine, but I will attend to the shame that is mine.
Yes.
So it's very, very different, as opposed to you're the reason for everything. It's like, yeah, you're partly your stuff. So let's say if it's grandparent, parent, I took on my love and loyalty to you. I took on your shame. I took on your suffering,
Yeah.
versus saying, here's some of, here's yours back. And actually, I'm going to keep the parts that are mine and I'm going to attend to mine. So this is the wholeness piece. So it's like,
Oh,
I
brilliant.
really have to work. This is where I need people like you, Norma, or I need people, as well, whether that's deeper therapy as well, to really, really look towards, where did the shame begin, really?
I can relate to that, Norma. And this is only the last couple of years, very quickly. When I was abused when I was 16 and ended up having a child as a result of that, right? And for years and years and years. And I went through counseling, all that kind, loads of it. And it was only in the last few years that I felt this enormous shame And I didn't know where. It was just out of the blue. And I guess I was ready to shift it and move on. Like, my body was, my essence, my soul was getting me to have a look at it. But what I discovered was I was carrying shame because I was blaming myself for what happened. Right now, I was 16, and I was like, okay, why am I blaming myself? Because I should have known better. I should have this, I should have that, I should have said no, all this stuff, right? And the minute I noticed that, and then I forgave, because I was giving myself a really hard time over it and keeping it to myself, all to myself, right? With big secret. Um, wasn't sharing it with anybody. And it was only when I released that and I forgave myself, because I forgave myself, right? Took back my part of me or whatever. And within a few weeks, I was doing work with Carrie, Children at Risk in Ireland. It was really weird how it happened. And I was doing stuff in the media and I was sharing my story. Now, I was getting a lot of counseling as I was going through that because it wasn't easy. It was very difficult. Every time I did a media session on TV or radio or whatever, I had a coach ready to debrief me after the call. It
Yeah.
was a lot of work, like, but there was such freedom and empowerment in that, Norma. So I totally get the forgiving yourself and noticing where we're blaming. And women do that a lot. They blame themselves because we have it that we should be a certain way, you know, and it frees us up, takes away a lot of the heavy burden, as you say.
And I think, you know, because I work with my own therapist as well, and it's Gestalt is the type of therapy, so it's very embodied type of therapy. And um, you know, this idea that, you know, you were saying, God, I'd addressed it, you know, at the time, and then it comes up again, and it's
Yeah.
and kind of Gestalt is very complementary to systemic coaching and even to the work you're talking about. Is that we're coming at it at a different lens, so we're on this staircase, you know, a spiral staircase, and our bodies will, the shame will be triggered in us again, and we're looking and we're attending to that as it arises. Then,
From a
because
different point of view this time.
we're not people are like, oh my God, am I back here again? I'm like, how is this coming up again? And this is where the attending piece, you know, where you had that resource of the coach to support you in that moment where the shame was coming up again. And it's like, because we're attending to other people's, or supporting them, rather they're attending it to themselves, we're walking with them and guiding with them. It will trigger, you know, our own, you know, the eldest daughter energies as well. So our
Yeah.
work is to keep resourcing ourselves to look at things in new angles and see supports that mightn't have existed when we needed them at the time.
It's ongoing, Norma, isn't it? It's ongoing. It's part of the journey. And
Yeah.
it's very exciting. It can be very exciting. And I think, you know, whenever we feel like we're having a breakdown, you know, I don't get excited immediately, but I get a sense of excitement because I know there's something to see
Yeah.
in this situation and then to have a breakthrough,
Yeah.
you know, and to become another layer of that better person. And it's just ongoing. And I think that's our life journey. And you know, everything terrible that may have happened in the past or whatever, we can always reframe it or use it to our better advantage to help us to become more resilient and be more resourceful and all that great stuff, and to help
And
other
keep
people.
working on that forgiveness piece of, like, on most days, you know, and there's somebody listening to this today that needs to be reminded that they are doing their best, and their best is going to be different every day. And I think as women, as you said, as high achieving women who want to feel successful, it's that reminder that, you know, it's okay to rest. And your mother mightn't have, or your grandmother, or your great grandmother, but for now, it's not that it's stopping with you, but you can, because you don't have to.
And that's exactly my message, Norma, because, you know, and I really discovered, and I'm discovering more and more, and I'm getting really more aligned and more aligned. But I believe as women, you know, hyperachievers, the overcarers, all the stuff that society expects from us, or our own story, or whatever it is, that ultimately we've got to mind our nervous system, and we've got to have a sense of um rest in order to replenish ourselves, in order to step into the better version of ourselves, rest and sleep. And it's all very important part of our self-care, because as women, we're attending to other people's needs most of the time. So
Exactly.
it's super important in order for us to rise, for women to rise. And not only just women, everybody, you know, I know I'm just focusing on women. That's a lot of my area of work. I do work with men as well. But I think it's important for everybody, Norma, the work that you're doing. We're coming near the end, and I could talk to you forever, Norma. I think your work is intriguing. I think it's very necessary for everybody. And I know that you focus in on people in the corporate world and transitioning and all that kind of stuff. What other ways do you work with people? And tell us where people can actually find you, Norma.
Great. Thanks, Marion Joanne. So I also do retreats. So I'm really blessed because I've trained in breath work and meditation and Reiki. So I kind of infuse all of them together. And I hold retreats on in a beautiful space in Kildare. And I have my next retreat on both money and love. I work with a human design coach that comes from the
Oh,
UK.
the design is amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we combine constellations with human design, and we have our next retreat on October 4th and 5th. And if you follow me on Norma O'Kelly, Systemic Coach on Instagram, you'll see the wait list for that. That will be going on sale towards the middle and late August. And so I do run retreats. I do like pop-ups every now and again. I have a free pop-up in the forest this Friday with some breath work. I have my own podcast, Beyond the Norm. And yeah, I think anybody who follows me either on LinkedIn or on Instagram will kind of see kind of some of my work. And so it's not just I work with a range of people, men and women, that are going through lots of transitions, not just the one from corporate into entrepreneurship. That's a program that I offer called
Mm.
From Roots to Rise.
Love it.
I love that. And there are people who it was probably I needed a version of me when I was transitioning out of corporate, because it's the commercial business acumen along with the deep attending to the deeper patterns that might get in the way when you start your business. But I work with, I have such a range of clients, both local, international. I'm really, really,
You're a
really
powerful
blessed.
woman, Norma. Absolute powerful woman. And for
Thanks.
anyway that I can support you, we need to support each other, don't we?
100%. And I think that's what's lovely about systemic work is there's work for all of us, and we all will find our right people that show up in the right way. I know, my theme is definitely around rest as well. I'm due holidays. I can't wait to just switch off. I have to walk my own walk. I see swim. That is my huge resource. But I know even now I'm actually too tired to even do that. So I know I'm due my break now as well.
Wow, that's so
Yeah.
great.
For care for myself.
Well, Norma, thank you so much for this conversation. I'm sure many of our listeners and viewers have been enlightened and have seen something in it that would relate to them. And I do encourage our listeners to reach out to Norma. She really is incredible. I had a conversation where one-to-one a few weeks ago, and it's just so intriguing and enlightening what I discovered, and especially about the triangle or the pyramid that you were talking about and carrying the load. That was a big eye opener for me. Now that was a massive eye opener for me. So yeah, there's so much that we can learn, and whatever is relatable and that works for you at that time, is always perfect. It's always perfect. Yes, there's different layers and loads of different stuff, but it's the timing. It's always perfect time, and it always is. And go and take that and use it and grow from that and show up at your best and show up as your best self. Norma, thank you so much for your
Thanks.
time today.
Thank
Thank
you
you
for
for
having me.
yeah, it's so excited. So for the listeners and the viewers, so there is a donation if you did enjoy this show, just to help me to continue putting these shows out and to support me, to support the podcast Empowering Family Health. And as always, do like and subscribe if you do want to see more of these videos or audio podcasts like this one. So with that, Norma, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, and I'll chat with you soon.
Brilliant. Thanks, Joanne. Thank you.
I do hope you are enjoying these conversations, and to help me continue pushing these videos and audio podcasts together, I do have an ask. I do need support to help me to keep bringing you knowledge and insights. There is a Patreon link, patreon.com/empowering family health, or you can make a donation via PayPal. All the links are in the description and the pinned comment. You can do a one-off or you can do a monthly support. So I'd really appreciate that. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Take care.